Hill's point, I mean, if the HOA wants to give us an idea of what they want to talk about, we'd be happy to work with the HOA and box something up to have a
Sure.
good framework for discussion.
If you can follow up and get with Tom so we can get it calendared.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Tom,
you.
thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you for
I
coming
think it would
out.
also be good to have it incorporated into the design of the new transportation center. The pathway can go from the bike path kind of up into the new transportation center as opposed to all the way down and around through Lot 4, or another option anyway,
Which bike path?
coming from Creekside.
Yeah, the transportation center that we're working at starts at lot 6, so it's about I'm not saying we can't, but right now they're about 300 yards difference from each other, but.
Right, but as the bike path,
I'm looking for it.
And these are the minutes from January 22nd, so
I don't know.
Councilman Circus, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm looking at line 140. I believe it's line 140. And my suggestion is that we add the full name, or we have the full name of the executive, the current temporary executive director of the Discovery.
Line 140.
Oh, Michael's Discovery. You mean
141, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
141.
Yeah. Michael Miracles. Can we put his last name in there? Is that what you're requesting?
Yes.
We can do that. Alyssa?
It must have been insignificant because I didn't mark it.
Okay. With that said, I'll advisory board. So we will see that at our next meeting.
Okay. And then are there still vacancies on the other boards that we need to still
P-TRAB,
fill?
I think. We have some opening on P-TRAB, don't we?
On PTRAB? Is that it?
A single-family home on P-TRAB, and I need 2 people on the Citizen Grant Review Board. Tammy would be one.
We need one more. Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
Shout out to those who may be interested. Okay, let's move on to the Saab presentation. Provide direction to Saab on the draft.
We have to approve that, don't we?
That
We
was on-
approved the
Yeah,
consent
then-
agenda.
It's part of the
Oh, it was
consent.
part
Under
of,
consent agenda.
Yeah.
it was part of consent.
Come on up. Come on down. Good to see everyone. Julianne, do you want to introduce the topic?
Yes, this is asking for direction from town council regarding an RFP that the Saab would like to be able to put out regarding a public art piece out at the Town Park Station location. Last fall, the Saab met with the poster board and showed them the sites on public lands that they thought might be worthy of putting public art on them. There was general consensus, and they thought that probably the easiest one to start with would be at Town Park Station. So there was discussion regarding that, and the Saab suggested or recommended that a proposed fee of up to $45,000 would be appropriate to get a significant public art piece. They have about $60,000 in their budget right now, and they thought that that would be a good place to start in terms of solicitation of the commissioned piece. So there is to go ahead and put the RFQ out on the cafe website, which is a call to artists, and there's a fee associated with that, about $525 to do that. But that's where you get much higher, more experienced artists typically will review that website for solicitations like this. So Michael Lorsung took a stab at the original draft of this along with
Catherine Bell.
Thank you, Catherine Bell. And we've done some refinement on it, and then they met again on January 24th, and we put some more finishing touches on it. So they would like to proceed with this, and they have a draft of it before you, and really are looking for some direction as to, is this the right approach to take? Are there any changes that should be made if we're going to pursue this? And with that, I'll turn over to Linda Rennick, who is our chair again this year, and take it away.
And away we go. Happy New Year to everyone. Julianne pretty much gave you the rundown that I was going to give you, so I will just tell you that with Andy from,
Rec Center.
yeah, right, from Center, from Recreations, we had identified 5 places, and the SOB voted, and we thought that the transportation center was the most visible to everyone coming in and out of the community, and so we chose that as our #1 spot. And he agreed that that would be a good place to start. And my new vice chair, sitting here, Michael Lorsung, is a very qualified artist working at Anderson Ranch, and he and Catherine Bell put together this RFQ to be presented online, hopefully with your approval in 2 days, going out on February 6th. We have a timeline, and the expected and hopeful presentation of this piece of art would be spring of 2020, so in a year.
Yeah.
Which is, according to Michael, who is an artist, that is about how long it would take to solicit proper and experienced artists, as well as give them the time to create a piece that would be suitable for our village. And we have in front of you, you have a list of the fees that we feel is fair. We don't want to pay them completely, and yet they would need some amount of funding to be able to get going on a project. So, without further ado, I know you have plenty of questions, and Michael is more capable of answering them than I am. So I will turn it over to Michael.
I have a question for Julianne. With the 2020 date and the location down by the town park station, the transit center, as an option, to what extent would that create challenges if we're going to redesign Park Station?
That certainly is a consideration. This particular site is pretty close to the town park station, and we're aware that there's already in the plans, or the thought is to do the pump track around that green area and then elsewhere through the park. But we really hadn't anticipated there was going to be much else at this point in time. But that RFP for the town park master plan has not gone out yet.
Let me back that up. The pump track is an idea that's called for in the poster plan that the poster board hasn't even necessarily bought off on. But to answer your question, there's a number of those issues that we need to work through. The likelihood of this art piece majorly impacting that redesign of the whole town park area is
It
slim.
shouldn't. I mean, if that's where the
We're
location.
well aware of it. It'll be planned around, and we'll make sure it won't be impactful.
Other questions?
I have a question. Well, I have a bunch of comments on all the written information. There was just a bunch of grammatical issues and other things that I would fix. But my main question, aside from those things, has to do with the 45,000. Because to me, when I read it, it basically says, no matter what you submit, we're going to pay you 45,000. Why doesn't it say the words up to 45,000?
You put that language in there. Typically, in my experience, when you've got a budget, if a town is putting forward $45,000, the chances that it's a little bit different from if you're getting bids to pour concrete for sidewalks, where you've got a series of contractors who are going, I'm going to try to, I'm going to squeeze my margins on this, and I'm going to try to come in under the next guy. My experience with public art is sort of the opposite of that, in that it tends to, because the budget and the margins are, $1,000 sounds like a lot of money, especially when you sort of put it up against the $60,000 that's allotted to the SOB budget for this year. But in the scope of, if you take a look at callforentry.org and you look at what's out there, you look at what is being commissioned, it's actually on the low end of the spectrum.
That's what I thought.
But it's a substantial amount of money, and I think it's an amount of money that will.
The roundabout was estimated as, and, you know, looking at that, like, I understand. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't like, oh, 45,000, like, that's, you know, I don't know, it just sounded weird to me. But
Sure.
I'm not an artist and I don't know enough about it.
It's an oddity that seems to be pretty unique to this particular branch of like budgeting public funds, because I've worked in the trades, and it's obviously a very different scenario when you're like budgeting for a public works project or something like that.
So I have a question about 45,000, which I think is somewhat on the light side for a significant piece of public art. Two questions. Why is it that we can't look at some private money?
Name those names. I mean, we don't have access to the names of people that we could work with, but we would love to be in touch with them and work with them. Why not? I mean,
You're
that
talking
would be
town
a
park and
delight.
It's an entrance piece. I think that we need to probably pursue that opportunity for locals that may be interested, and we need to identify who might they get in contact with. And second part of that is talk with the bank again as to the use of those funds there.
So my question would be almost twofold here. I think $45,000 is not enough, because when you start talking about lighting and where you reach this particular piece of art, a nice piece of sculpture, and protecting it, and like I say, concrete's involved, lighting's involved, and what size are we talking about? Do we have, if you put something out there to the artist, are you telling them how, giving them a size requirement?
So there's specifically no size requirement in there, because what we're asking for at this point is a series of qualifications, which will lead to a request for proposals from a selected group.
Okay.
And so at that point, like, typically what'll happen in a situation like this, and again, if you take a look at call for entry and you look at calls that are on parity with what we're doing, you're not going to see usually, unless it's sort of scaled to, like, you know, we've got a parking garage wall that's X size, there's going to be site dimensions. And typically the way that these calls go is that you leave it up to the artist to understand and to determine the appropriate scale for an object that's going to be placed in that environment. And obviously that's also something we're going to look at as we're sort of reviewing the finalists for these proposals.
But I agree with Madam Mayor that, you know, I don't think it's enough money budgeted at this point to do the proper, as I said, and lighting, and because we want to showcase this, I'm assuming.
I mean, I think that the impetus, you know, initially there was,
This is kind of a surprise.
we didn't expect to have the ability to offer $45,000. In fact, what we had initially looked at was our 30, I think, or 35. And so we sort of came to the $45,000 as a way to preserve some of our budget for some smaller projects going forward throughout the year, while also being able to install something of significance, you know, in 2020, which I think, you know, I think $45,000, like, you know, I would agree, like, it's not a huge budget, but it's doable.
Start. Just
And that was sort of I think the view that the board was taking on it when we came up with that amount. I'm happy to entertain the idea that we could, you know, somehow involve private donors. I think that has to be looked at very carefully, especially in the realm of public art. And there has to be an understanding with the donors that there's a level of detachment from sort of their money and what ends up showing up, that they're not buying a piece of art for the town, that they're funding a public art program for the town. And I think as long as that communication is clear, it can work out really well. I've also seen it go the other way.
thank you.
I also think that one of the reasons we chose
Statement for our community.
so if we could somehow get some private funders to invest, then happy to accept that.
How would that affect your timeline?
Well, we could
Add that to the RFP. I think that we could do that without really pushing the, I think that we could probably do that with minimal on the timeline, ultimate sort of control and finality when it comes to sort of lighting the work and that kind of thing. And so they'll roll that up into a separate budget outside of the, whatever.
Privately, which is, I think, the option you put forward,
Yep.
Madam Mayor. Or if you said, you know what?
Say, go ahead and, I think
Or 3. That first sentence, I read it like 10 times. I'm just not, or that, it's one sentence. The location of such display and whether or not the display work for a given period, it's thing. Is it whether or not to display the work for a given period? Something's not right with that sentence.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to find where you're at.
So it's that
This
exhibit,
is
it's the
the
agreement?
contract, the draft contract, which
draft
really
contract.
isn't draft, it was just to show a sample of what the contract might look like to an
I'm
art.
gonna say.
I have,
go ahead.
I have a couple of concerns on the proposed timeline. The first being that you're allowing really only one day to make a determination on the finalists after the RFQ. And I don't know the process that you're planning to use that, but if it is to try to get a consensus amongst the members of the SOB, that's not a lot of time, to try to get in touch, communicated with everybody. So that was one area that I thought might need to be adjusted, but again, I think it really remains up to you, both of you, as to whether the process that you're thinking about for that would fit within a 24-hour period. And then the other was on part 2 for the RFP, under May 6th, town council presentation, or the presentation to town council. That's one of those clauses that I thought could be flipped around and made a little clearer.
Sure.
But I know what you're trying to get, I know what you're trying to achieve, but I'm not sure that the council, I just wonder if the council would be able to do that in one meeting, and perhaps need 2 meetings to, to really get all of the questions answered in order to move forward. So, I don't know if it requires a change necessarily, but just to be aware that it might push your, schedule back a little. And then the other, the last piece is that you, somewhere in there, I think under section B, there's a potential for a request to construct a model. And I think that
Get it done. Yeah, it can be a little bit brutal, but it's also the advantage to doing it that way, and the advantage to sort of not making it a prolonged process, is that it forces you to actually sort of make decisions based on kind of intuitive and immediate considerations. Whereas what I've found is that when you protract that and you draw it out, you end up sort of really muddy of that decision-making process. So I think if we can keep it relatively concise, as concise as that's possible, it'll help us out. And again, I think that next, the selected artist notified, I think that's a point where we should also, if there's any question about that, there's no reason that we can't say the week of X, the selected artist.
So that they have the 45 or a
Except
number that we
for-
decide upon.
I mean, sure, you haven't adopted the 2020 budget yet, you'd have to
Right.
adopt it at that point. But I mean, I think you'd have to, it would be easier, or maybe even better, if you just committed to a number and then we figured out how to do that. I mean, if your number's gonna be 75 or 100 or 45, you can get the timing laid out, but I think you need to set the expectation of how much money you think you wanna spend. And if it's not gonna approve site prep, when site prep is something we contract out, so that's a real dollar. When the stand came in for the roundabout project, it was concrete work, it was forming, we had to hire engineers. it was a direct cost, so it's a dollar amount. It's not something we can just, take two guys and a shovel and do normally.
Right, but we found in the budget to.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what I'm saying. If you guys say, here's how much we're willing to spend, I will help you find where that money is for sure. I just need to know how much you want to spend, and we can line it up.
What number are you at?
I'd like the $75,000 number.
Okay.
To include site prep or no?
No, not to include site prep.
Are you?
Where am I? Honestly, I'm thinking more of 100. I don't know, you think trying to raise another $50,000? I don't think it doesn't feel like it should be that hard.
It's not. Gotta know how to make the phone calls, who to call.
Yeah, who to call.
So that money to be raised would go through our adoption process? Because we kind of stumbled through it with the roundabout piece, right?
Yes.
Donors wouldn't have say in design element.
I understand that, I'm just saying, the process for
Accepting the
those
money.
funds.
Well, the last time the money went to the bank.
Is that the wind out there?
No,
Oh, I thought that was the storm. I thought,
it's a speaker.
I don't remember the details, but I do
She doesn't
know
know what
that
it is.
the donations, people's donations went through the bank.
Right. I just want to make sure that process, we're going to go down that road, that we don't, muddy the waters and it's done in the right way.
It
So
should,
it's not, this isn't
not
gonna
through
be
the
a
bank.
situation where there is gonna be a individual donating a piece. Right, this is gonna be
Individual.
Saab,
this would
this
it'd
is
be
the Saab recommendation, for a piece, and if people want to, then they can.
It's public-private is
So
what
it's
it is.
public-private, yeah.
So you're not thinking it's actual dollars, you're thinking it's going to be a piece of art?
No.
No,
You're saying rather than one individual, this project or the next project, then the money could sit there.
well, the amount remaining in that fund, and I need to go check what I'm saying here, is I don't want to go there because it may be too confidential, but I would suggest that donations for this piece would come to the town, and you would still have a write-off, correct? A tax deduction?
5, I think, that's the number that we came up with based on the budget. If there's the opportunity, I guess it depends on how council feels. Sounds like there's strong contingent that feels that this is going to be a statement piece for the town, which I think is reasonable, and that if there's the opportunity to put more money into this, it's worth it, because it's not only going to be a statement piece about coming into Snowmass Village and all the rest of that. It's also, in a lot of ways, going to fix, but I also think that, when you look at what's out there, bumping up to $75,000 or even $100,000 and being able to eat the cost of site prep is a big deal, and it changes the scope of where we're competing in that particular marketplace.
Can anyone tell me how much those ring outside?
Yes. They were $75 or $90, 90,000.
It was 90.
What does that tell you right there?
90?
Yeah, I believe it was 90.
Yeah.
So if those rings, that piece was that, then I feel Bob's probably more on the mark with the 100,000 than you are at 75. But that's just my.
So you're 100?
I would say, if that's how much those cost and you're looking at something substantial.
You know, you want your town, you want your citizens to be proud of a piece of art.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to go to 100.
I have no problem going with
Okay, we're going to 100, and then we'll work on,
so it's
that. Come down.
the town taxpayers are going to commit, or the town dollars budget's going to be $100,000, and then there's going to be fundraising on top of that.
we're gonna go out and raise some money
In addition to the 45,
in
be
addition to the 45.
Okay.
55.
So it could be up the 50,000 that's budgeted, and then you could raise 50.
Yes.
Some combination.
Yes.
But we're expecting fundraising for a total budget of 100. And within that 100 would include that's the total all-in project cost.
That's
We're
not,
each gonna raise 10.
the point is, the land
Girl
prep
Scout
would still
cookies
be
are coming out.
donated. We would do the site prep.
Well, and again,
That's
that's not something,
included in
that's
the-
not something,
No, that's not
when it's,
included, it's not included in the 100.
that's a cost that we would be adding. I mean, we don't have electricians on staff. We would go out and bid that work, just like we did.
I'd say let's see what they can come up with their proposal to begin with, and then we could work with that, and
So-
then we'd be able to see what the site prep is gonna take,
So this RFQ,
depending on the location.
this RFQ could go out soon with a $100,000 number, and we could round out some things, but roughly speaking, it'd be about half of existing budget and half of it expected to
You
be
got it.
fundraised for.
Yes.
So you're each in for,
We're each in for 10. If we can't raise it, we just have to forfeit our salary for the year.
Listen,
I'm just kidding. Sure.
okay, do you have direction? I think we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
thank you very much, Michael. and
Thank
thank
you
you.
Sending
so
those
much.
comments to
We are
Julia.
very appreciative, and I think our committee will be very excited.
Oh, that's good, that's good. We're gonna get there with a whole arts community here before long. Okay, let's move on. The next item is the Financial Advisory Board and the EAB Board Renewal Energy Project recommendations. This is found on page 42. Travis and Clint. Andrew, welcome. And I talked to Greg Smith. Had a really nice conversation with him. He's the chair of the FAB. He had to go catch a plane. He was gonna go tomorrow, but he didn't think he'd get out. He probably talked to you, Andrew, maybe not. So anyway, I have some comments, and the recommendations from the FAB are included in the memo here. So who wants to get started? Travis?
I can kick us off just real quick. During the 2019 budget process, we reviewed a portfolio of renewable energy projects that the town council approved funding for, subject to review by the Financial Advisory Board and Environmental Advisory Board. Both boards did so at their January meetings just last month. And we have Andrew Wicks here, the chair of the Environmental Advisory Board, to summarize the EAB's findings. And as you indicated, Greg was planning to be here but couldn't make it. But we did summarize the FAB's findings in your packet. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew.
Thank you, Travis. Thanks for having me. Madam Mayor, council members. Just want to go with the energy that was kicked off right there. Can I get 100,000? Can I get $1 million?
We're gonna put you on as an auctioneer.
Yeah, bring it up to $2 million. So
We're gonna
I'm
have some
here
fun with that one.
to represent the.
We're gonna raise money for this project too.
That's right.
All right.
Well, hopefully, is this off? Yeah. Should I use this? Yeah. Got it.
Okay, there you go. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. So, as Travis mentioned, I'm Andrew Wicks. I am representing the EAB, which is the Environmental Advisory Board. I'm not representing the Financial Board, as you mentioned, but we do have their recommendations here. So just to recap on what is being planned and laid out, is there are 6 total projects, 5 of which are PV solar installations, and 1 of which is a micro hydro facility, which, thanks to the foresight of water and sanitation, they've made it quite easy and have kept the costs down on that. So the return on the hydro investment is perhaps more attractive, and to know that water will generate some electricity. So overall, the EAB has been supportive of all 6 projects. Obviously, it's a lot easier to be supportive of something when it's not coming out of your own bank account. You say, yeah, we could do that. So obviously, that decision is ultimately up to you guys. Joseph Goodman, who is on the Rocky Mountain Institute head of community solar, he thought that the costs on the PV installations were a bit high and expected them to come down. So that total figure, as you can see, was
900.
clocked in at 992,000, and the grants and rebates that were already presenting themselves, including a $110,000 grant from CORE, would sum to $160,000, and more of those would potentially be possible. We have to give kudos to Travis for kind of helping solicit those grants. One thing that the EAB strongly feels is that if there is a reduction in costs, that extra money be used for storage. And we are hoping that there is going to be some margin left over in the cost, and that those assets could be used to kind of focus on storage. We think that's the next step in terms of resilience. One thing I wanted to point out is that these six projects would generate 70% of the consumption at the facilities that they are on, which would represent 30% of total town of Snowmass Village needs, including Snowmelt Road. So that is a pretty substantial number. So I feel like it would be one nice step driven by the town to attain that goal.
So, are these fixed systems? I don't remember all the detail. I know there's some here on Town Hall. Are those fixed panels?
Everything would be fixed, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Mhm.
Andrew, the last figure we had for maybe this only had 5. The last figure I show is 896,886. So it has creeped up a little bit to 9.25.
Mhm.
But have we been able to get more rebates? I guess we have. You said there's one 120 and two $260,000 rebates?
So on the, Travis is probably going to help me on this one. On the public works, there is a nearly $35,000 rebate. Am I correct?
Yeah, so to date, we have 2 large sources of funds secured, or at least promised to us. One's the Randy Udall grant through CORE, $110,000,
Okay.
which is specific and only for this building. And then we have $50,000 in rebates committed from Holy Cross. So those are included in the financial estimates that both the FAB and EAB looked at. But the cost that you were referring to, Bob, that was specific for the solar projects, the $892,000.
Oh, and the 925 is
That-
everything?
That incorporates the microhydro project as
Okay.
well, which is another
That
96,000.
helps, thanks.
Yeah.
I had a question on this, on the concept of storage, Andrew. Maybe it's premature to ask, but I'll do it anyway, and if it is, just tell me. But in storage use, can those batteries actually be added into the system so that they're adding power to the system at all times, and then basically are full, and then if the system goes down, then the power is drawn only off of them?
Technically speaking, I'm probably not the one in our group to speak on that, but the capacity for the battery storage has been increasing dramatically year over year, and obviously with the goal of incorporating it into PV units. In this case, we see a strong positive synergy in combining it with the microhydro. So I believe the capacities are there so that if it's running low on the different town systems, that battery can then feed in and be utilized if a system is down. And then they can also generate during those slower times and be utilized on the grid when there's more demand.
So I guess what I'm thinking to help me to crystallize it is when the sun's not shining at night, you drain the battery down and then you fill it up again the next day.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So you're constantly using that battery to fill time when the PV system is not generating power.
Correct. really understand what that would take, is why we mentioned on this last bullet point from the EAB's recommendations to evaluate with Holy Cross what these critical loads would be, because obviously much different right now than it is in May.
Well, it seems to me that doing an evaluation project, as you're suggesting, is a very good segue, into the next step in this whole PV process.
I think it is.
Yeah.
And there is the aesthetic piece component, which displays that the town is committed to generating renewable energy and generating to at least attaining the 20 by
2, but I would impact grant funding. And the reason why he and I were talking about this, and I tell you, I had what you call an epiphany when I was in Palo Alto at the Autonomous Vehicle Conference. I cannot believe the amount of R&D and what's out there already on the product market and what's coming. And there was a person from University of Nevada up in Reno who runs a big research center on AVs, as well as the whole issue of the electric grid and what have you. The technology is off the charts, and I felt like I was in kindergarten when I first started, but my goodness. So we know that there will be a lot more technology coming out for these types of systems. And, we looked at them, 6 or 7 years ago when Arnie Morcom was here on council, up at a solar installation here. Smartest thing we didn't do was build that installation. But I don't know. I don't know. Have you guys talked about maybe 2 at a time or 3 panels and then studying it, or does it impact grant funding?
It absolutely impacts grant funding.
Oh,
Yeah. One of the larger grants we're going after is through the state DOLA office, Department of Local Affairs, and that is for the whole package, all 6 projects at once.
It's $250,000.
200,000.
Sorry, $200,000.
One fifth.
How much does it peel back if you start decreasing the amount of installations? I mean, you only get the grant funding if you're 6, or is there a tiered process?
So the Randy Udall grant that I mentioned earlier that we did secure is specifically for this building, so that one would be independent and it wouldn't matter what happens with the other projects.
Mm-hmm.
That's how much?
110,000.
Okay, so I think that makes total sense. We should charge ahead with that one. The micro hydro, I think, totally makes sense. I think we should look at other opportunities for micro hydro. I think one of the challenges with storage, residential projects right now, you basically can't get storage. You have to sign a contract with Holy Grid and Holy Cross and put your energy back into the grid. So I think it'd be, part of the research will be to figure out, if what the storage capacity is and if it's really available. I think this is a great project going forward, but again, looking at those panels and the number of installations, like the panels, for example, that we put on the rec center that are basically non-functional now. How old are those panels?
14 or 15 years old.
Yeah. So
and that's partially because of the salt water and the design, and there's some
There's
other.
also hydronic panels.
yeah, it's a totally different deal. I understand, but I think the point is well taken. We're doing this because we want to do the right thing, but I think financially we want to make sure we're doing it in the right way. So if there's a way that we can look at it, and let's go after the lowest hanging fruit. If putting panels on, say the maintenance facility isn't going to give us the highest yield, maybe we do peel back a couple of the projects and make sure we're going about it in the right way. If the technology is coming and we can do 2 or 3 more, in the next round as technology evolves, I think that would make sense as well.
I think you guys, Tom and Bill, you guys bring up some really strong points. Financially, when you look at the 25-year present value, it's it's not terribly attractive from a financial standpoint.
Right.
It's actually kind of horrendous. The only thing that really sticks out in the green is that micro hydro facility because of the infrastructure that they put in place and the foresight that they had to allow for a turbine. So we know that there's a balance act here, you know, between financial investments, between commitments to goals and so forth. So we completely understand what needs to be balanced there. I think, Madam Mayor, to your point as well, that the technology is rapidly increasing and has been even over the past 2 years. So when we're looking at replacing, you know, panels in 25 years, this could be a lot more cost effective. This could be a lot cheaper. There could be some serious new technologies in that amount of time, in accordance with storage. So we agree with you on that. The financial commitment is quite hefty. So it depends on your
But
goal.
Andrew-
I'm sorry. On that note, the FAB did recommend
Well,
going
I
forward
was
with
gonna
this.
say, Environmental Advisory Board recommended, but 4-0 on, you all voted for this, but
So the Finance
He was
Advisory Board.
recommend, he was talking about.
The Finance Advisory Board did as well. They
Well,
were,
they, in talking with Greg, that approval was the issue around the 2020 goal and what's good for our town, even though,
But my question would have been, did you talk about the financial impact of the panels aren't gonna pay for themselves in 20, 25 years? Matter of fact, that technology that we put in 20 years ago is not gonna even be compared to what's available at the moment. And I'm looking into the future, of course. I mean, how far of a discussion did you guys talk about?
There were financial considerations. Travis and Clint have had the numbers prepared for us multiple times. So we've been looking at the financial burden the entire time. The thing that pushed us over on the 4-0 vote was the potential to integrate storage and move towards being a more resilient community. So that was the pushover.
That's an overwhelming thought, which is, I think, the right direction to go in, but I think the financial part of it is, what are we gonna do to maintain these panels consistently, and what's going to have to be repaired consistently?
and so I would just point out the second bullet from the Finance Advisory Board. I mean, they were very conservative and they required staff to do a net present value
Yep.
of the nine. Overall finding was, this is not, financially, it's even, if you want to go make environmental strides, it's an opportunity that the EAB would have to weigh in
So
on.
Travis, the Udall grant was, I don't remember if there was a timeline on that. Was there a timeline that we had to use it by? Because it'll just roll into the year, because it's already been approved by Corps.
Yeah, I think it might be like 18-month,
Right.
start to finish.
So,
construction
the-
talent.
there is a,
So,
so we can get this
and that
building, and
grant
that's what it's for.
is included in this financial estimate, but the other grants that I've spoke to are not.
Right.
So that alone would flip this into the black and make it a positive return on investment.
So the DOLA grant that you're applying for, you can go after more than one DOLA grant on like projects, correct?
Unlike projects?
Like, so if we do so many panels, we've got this building going, and let's say you do one other site, and it's funded, got a grant from DOLA. Let's say a year later, you're going to do another project, obviously panels. Can you re-up a DOLA grant, or is it a one-time fits-all?
You can absolutely continue to reapply, but one of the major factors that DOLA looks at is dollars in from the town. So it they get to see how they're leveraging their dollars.
Oh, I see.
And one of these, the $200,000 we're requesting is matched against the, roughly it'd be $700,000 that the town's applying towards it, less grants. And they like to make sure that their dollars are getting leveraged. And so the smaller the project, the smaller the ability to leverage. But that's just an evaluation criteria. And Travis can speak to this better than I can, but one of the things that they understand is paybacks are important to municipal governments. And so one of our stronger pitches to them in this application was that they're helping us improve the payback period or help make it more reasonable. The state's got not an obligation, but a goal of improving sustainability as well. And so they see that as an opportunity for them to reach their goal using our money and making that leverage happen. And so that's why I think that's all that said, it kind of comes down to financially, it's only from here, depending on the grants that show up. We're presenting you a toughest case scenario, but we're doing that just so that we know we can deliver better, and we expect to, but we didn't want to paint a rosier picture than we can today.
No, I think Andrew painted a pretty good picture, and, you know, the goal for 2020 to be more energy efficient, and whether it's the replacement of our snow melt boilers or panels and so on, we have to do something to help the environment and the world for our carbon footprint, and I think we have to do something, and I guess if we sat around looking at our crystal ball trying to think which is the best panel that's gonna happen and what years are gonna come out, we can't do that. You know, the technology is gonna continue to change, just like computers and just like everything else, and smartphones and so on. So I think we do need to move forward with one of the projects.
I had two thoughts.
I was getting ready to call Alyssa.
Excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah, Alyssa, I haven't heard.
What? I am good with it. I mean, I don't have any, I think that the FAB, I mean, their recommendation is good, and I don't know. I don't think we should mess with that. I think we should just move forward. I mean, if we could space it out, maybe it would be better, but if it affects the ability to get grants or any of those things, then I think we should just go for it.
Yeah, I trust Greg's judgment. I think he's very conservative. I think, you know, if he's recommending the project and the FAB is as well, I'm in favor of it.
Two thoughts. One of the FAB's bullet points says that the town's commitment to an environment and sustainable energy use, and to provide an opportunity to use this project as a leadership platform to encourage the use of sustainable energy. I think that's a great statement, but I don't see how that works, how one can be taking a leadership role in a project that has a negative payback or a break-even payback over 20 or 25 years.
Your payback is environmental.
Right, it's not about the money.
That's how I would look at it.
Well, the payback is environmental, not to the individual, but to the planet.
To the planet.
Okay. Okay, I hear that.
It's our contribution to mankind.
I hear that. I hear that. And you know, it's great, but not everybody thinks that way. Okay, but that's just, that's the first point. And the second point comes to me out of the conversation about storage. And are there synergies between certain types of PV panels and certain types of battery storage that one needs to link together to make a panel system and a storage system work to the highest level of efficiency? And if we move ahead with panels, without evaluating the storage, do we know that we can plug the storage in at a later date and, you know, everything will operate as efficiently as possible?
Will they be compatible?
No.
Will they be compatible? Thanks, Tom.
So how we kind of envision going about this, because we do think it is a good recommendation by the EAB, is to incorporate a component of storage into our proposal process so that contractors, the experts that do this elsewhere, can actually tell us what would be feasible at each site, how much storage is possible, and what that would cost. And I do want to point out that adding that component would make these projects much more expensive and probably hurt the payback
So
even more.
what
But
we-
that's something that we want to evaluate as
So
part
we
of the
almost need to
RFP
bring
process.
this back, is what I'm hearing. You do some homework here or what are you suggesting?
I think what our recommendation is, we wanted to get you up to speed.
Okay,
We wanted you to hear the FAB recommendation that I'm gonna go, let me call it neutral for a minute. The EAB said, move forward with caution. In order, when we move forward, it's gonna go through an RFP process for about a $900,000 project. during the budget process, you asked that you wanted to look at this again. We want to make sure that we're dotting i's and crossing t's politically with you all as we move one of our larger projects forward this year. Our recommendation is to take them all forward, and then we'll evaluate what comes back, depending on the grants, depending on the projects. But fundamentally, we think, you know, we're not saying it has to be one way or the other. We don't know all the answers, but we think overall it's the right project to move forward to hit that council goal of 20% by 2020. And it's not, this is not gonna hit that goal. This is gonna help us hit the goal. It's a 6%,
It's 6.3%.
something, whatever it is. But it's just inching towards that to make sure that the commitment remains and we're making progress towards it. And that's part of the reason that we made the same discussion, or had that same discussion with the FAB. And that's why they talked about that leadership, is this is the chance to show leadership towards reaching that goal.
I think you've got consensus to move forward. I'd probably like to see what comes back with the whole concept of storage. What does that really mean? How much? It's way out, it's way above my pay grade.
It's going to be more expensive, and it's going to make those
Okay.
payback. And so if the goal is to make sure that net present value of the payback is positive, storage is not gonna make that happen. And that's why we're saying, and what I wanna take away is resiliency is important, meeting the 2020 goals important, and doing it financially reasonably is important, but you can't, adding storage is gonna add cost, which is gonna reduce payback or increase payback.
Well, maybe,
Well, no, not necessarily, because you're using your battery storage instead of pulling electric every night or some part of the night.
I mean, I am no expert. It is gonna increase the cost considerably.
Well,
and
it'll
it does-
increase the cost, yeah.
And which is gonna increase that pay, and again, we're just trying to understand, is the goal payback, or is the goal, we're working with that budget that the council approved, the $900,000 it is, and we're trying to come up with the best project possible,
I think-
understanding these constraints.
Not to speak for Bob, but I mean, with the capability, Andrew and Travis, to go with the basic plan to begin with, and then the capability of adding more storage later could happen.
Could
If
happen.
it's compatible with that many, if we've got 15 panels or 10 panels, what's the capacity of the storage for X amount of panels? That's what we need to make sure, that if the town decides this is working out pretty good for the global thing, and for the town, I think it's gonna take a while. Everybody knows it's gonna take a while to pay for itself, if it does, go to the positive side. But I think the capability of adding more storage needs to be the big question, if it's compatible with X amount of panels that we go with.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And then you might find that on one installation, it's, much easier to incorporate than on another. And
Absolutely.
will actually help
That's right.
drive costs down.
I think,
so-
once we do the first installation, I think we're gonna get a better experience of what we wanna do for the
exactly.
second and third.
Yeah, I think we're all gonna go to school on this project.
Invite me.
Yeah, we need to get beyond kindergarten, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, you've done a lot of great work, so thank you for
And
your
I wanna thank
leadership.
the EAB
And,
for your hard work. And I
Travis,
look forward
thank
to
you.
your recommendations.
You worked hard too on this project and all the grants, so thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Andrew.
And as you guys continue to work forward, keep us in touch and come and see us.
Thank you all. Thanks for your time.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, thank you, thank you. Next, we're gonna move into the discussion on raising the age to purchase tobacco products to 21. And we have leadership from the Public Health Department. And Reese, here, come on up. Let's get you all up here. Okay. As I shared with town council at our last meeting, I'm very involved with the Public Health Board, and this issue's a very hot topic. And so, with that said, I don't know who was going to take the lead, but Karen, why don't you introduce our colleagues from the Public Health Board?
Well, I think we're into the evening, so good evening. I'm Karen Kenneman, and I'm the Pitkin County Public Health Director. And I have a couple folks here that I'm going to introduce as well. So we have Risa, who is our tobacco education specialist, I guess. She has a longer title that I'm not going to share with you. But she's been doing a lot of work in the community and regional work for Eagle County and Pitkin. Really looking at tobacco needs in our community, and so just completed a needs assessment. And with that needs assessment, what we found, which might not be surprising to any of you, is that teen vaping is astronomical in this community. And so just really feeling a sense of urgency around that and really wanting to address that in a multitude of different ways. So I'll let her talk a little bit more about that. And then we also have Dr. Kim Levin, who's our Board of Health Medical Officer, and she's been an amazing proponent around promoting policies that really impact health in our community and led the way with the Aspen T21 effort. So they're both the experts, and I just get to support their work here.
So welcome, welcome, welcome. So Rhonda, Brian, who's going to kick off this discussion?
Well, basically, this was a discussion that we had, and you asked us to bring it forward, and we provided examples of ordinances in other neighboring communities. And before we could actually put an ordinance together, there's some issues that we need to have you make decisions on. So those are included in the packet information today, but you asked me, and also Risa has been communicating with me, so they're here to talk about some things. But if you go through the staff report, we just need to know direction on what to put into the ordinance in regards to licensing. I do have, if you see on the first page there, we do have an update that half of we have 4 entities that sell cigarettes. Half of those, 2 of them, have already raised their purchase age to 21. That was the Conoco and Sundance Drug and Liquor. The Daily Bottle Shop and Clark's Express are still selling to 18 and over, awaiting an ordinance. They haven't done it voluntarily.
Do they also sell vaping products?
No.
Okay.
No. Daily Bottle Shop is strictly cigarettes. And Clark's Express is strictly cigarettes. They don't have enough space in those 2, but everybody else has the vaping. Sundance does, and so does the Conoco gas station. And we have 2 vending machines at this time right now. One of them has already told me that they have interest in removing it, and that's at the Slow Groovin' at the back. They're having that one removed. And the one at Zane's, I have let Eddie know that we're discussing this, and he would like to keep it the cigarette machine and have the bartender card people, only because it's right beside the bar. So these are things that, it's up to you on how you want the ordinance written. So I think Risa's going to give us some more information.
You or Dr. Levins, you want to talk about what we're, let's figure out our landscape again. What are we seeing here in Pitkin County, Snowmass Village, Estate? And Dr. Levins, you also need to weigh in on some of, because it's pretty astonishing.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you all for looking at this topic and for having the opportunity here. And it's great to meet everyone. And Marky, we've worked together before. So this is a very important piece of legislation that I really am urging you all to pass in Snowmass. The picture is that, with vaping, there's very, very high rates of our teenagers and youth in this community initiating the addiction to nicotine. And once that occurs, it's basically a lifetime addiction. And so the adolescent brain is very susceptible to addiction, and it's basically one of the best marketing schemes that's ever occurred. So by passing Tobacco 21, what can be done, and really we're looking at a consolidated effort, and Aspen was the first city to pass it in Colorado, and that was in June of 2017, started in January 2018, so it's been about a year now. And Basalt has since then passed it, and Carbondale and Avon, so you would be the 5th. And this type of effort and using a consolidated around this area to pass Tobacco 21 is very important. So I'm really urging you to, and to do it in a way that has enforcement, which is really, really important in terms of creating a model for the rest of the state, because really we are the area that's pushing this, and it's going to create a domino effect, and the state will eventually go. There's 6 states in the nation now that have passed Tobacco 21. And again, the theory behind it, which makes it so effective, is that if you raise the age from 18 to 21, you take away the source from the 15 to 17-year-olds, which is the really vulnerable group of becoming addicted to nicotine. And this includes e-cigarettes, cigarettes, any tobacco products. So I really urge you to pass it across the board. That includes cigarettes, e-cigarettes, all tobacco products. And to create what's a tobacco retail license, which was created in Aspen, and that is the way to enforce this, and hopefully enforce it. In terms of this vending machine, which I didn't actually know that they still existed. I was actually at Slow Grooving the other night, and I saw it in the back, and I was like, what is this thing? I thought they were gone in the 70s, but that, hopefully they'll remove that. Which would be an easy source, and I really hope that Zane's, if you put enough pressure on them, decides to remove theirs completely. And it's really important just to try to make some across-the-board decisions about this, because if you have any kind of areas that have some weaknesses in the decision here, that it doesn't work as well, and we're creating a model for others in the state. So a tobacco retail license, which includes cigarettes, and as you probably know, that means that the city of, the town of Snowmass would forego the percentage of sales that you get back from the state from selling cigarettes, which is such a weird thing. And in Aspen, the city council was amazing, and they felt that the stance, the ethical, moral stance to protect our youth was much greater than losing those funds. And they also decided, as you probably all know, in Aspen, is to pass a tax in coordination with this, a tobacco tax, which passed really easily, and since then has recouped way more than the funds that they had to forego just to pass this. So it's really worth it to kind of go all the way with this, and use enforcement, including decoys and enforcing it with a tobacco retail license. Now, there's only 4, and 2 of them have already unbelievably made their own stance, and I don't even know if anywhere else in the nation that a retailer has taken this stance on their own. And I really would like to actually put Snowmass on the map in the Tobacco 21 website, and let kind of the rest of the nation know what happened with Sundance and was it?
The Conoco.
And the Conoco, to like step forth and do this on their own. It's incredible. So it's that's my pitch, and RISA has a lot more numbers. Locally, we're very high in terms of e-cigarette use, and I mean, e-cigarettes have just exploded among youth, and it's a really, really sad phenomenon that's occurring. Again, nicotine is like one of the most highly addictive drugs, and people don't think of it that way. It's more addictive than heroin. So, and what that means is that it's a really fast on and a really fast off. So the addiction happens so quickly that you need another hit. And these developing brains, it's, I think the research will be shown, it's so new, it's really in the past 5 years that e-cigarettes have just kind of infected our youth, that it's going to take years before the research comes out to show that it's bad. We know it's bad. And to take the stances that we can in our communities locally is going to just be one of the most important things that we can do, and to do it with effectiveness and a tobacco retail license. So that's my pitch for this, and I hope you guys do pass it with kind of full, in the full entourage instead of partial.
Well, I'm a person that believes we got to get tough. This is, to me, one of the toughest challenges that we have in working with our youth, because tomorrow's youth, we need their brains to be very functional as they take on leadership around the world. So I want to, this is me, I can't speak for all of us, I want it as tough as possible. Licensing, enforcement, and I saw that tobacco was not going to get licensed, but the tobacco related. I'm all about license and enforcement and getting those cigarette machines out. Yeah, that's me.
I agree. I mean, I went to the, Reese was there, went to the vaping thing that they did at the high school last week, and I just was shocking, just the numbers and all the information, and having 2 children that are approaching, you know, teenage years, one in them. I mean, I just feel like I don't see how you can do anything else but make them license it. I mean, if they want to sell it. And I know it's different than what you guys recommended, and there might be some ramifications for us in doing that, but I feel like we should do what Aspen and Basalt did, and that's just my personal opinion.
Well, before we start getting too carried away with licensing, we ought to hear from Brian about what enforcement would be like without a license or with a license. In other words, there are options other than license. There are 2 options, and one is a partial license, and the other is no license. And Brian, I'd like to hear, you know, your thoughts on what each of these options mean as it affects your, you know, your department and the police security.
The enforcement, I don't think, will be any different between a licensed facility or our suggested use. It's going to be a matter of penalties when someone's caught doing something that they're not supposed to. I've actually got a suggestion I hope doesn't blow your mind, but I would like to see the council consider, you know, these laws that govern smoking are purchase, use, and possession, and I'd like to see us include possession as part of the ordinance, so that anyone under the age of 21 in possession or use of tobacco products would be guilty of a local fine. Actually, you shouldn't even say a fine. We can decide on what that penalty would be, probably education and things like that. But I think we should take a stance in Snowmass Village and say, if you're under 21, this is not a place for you to smoke. It would be kind of ironic for us to tell the Conoco, the Sundance Drugs, not to provide these products, but on a Thursday night concert, we could sit there and watch 17-year-olds sit in a pile and smoke cigarettes or vape without being able to do anything about it. And I think it would go a long way for Snowmass to send a message and go, retail's not available, and so is use is prohibited as well. And I think, again, that would allow us tools to use, just like a open container, for instance. We don't hammer everybody who's walking through the village with an open alcohol container, but when we see a problem spot, we see a group of people that might be having an unsanctioned party, we can use that particular ordinance to make contact, break it up, and send it on its way. And I would say the same thing would happen with cigarettes and vaping and those kinds of things, that they would give us a tool to contact that group of minors, find out what they're doing, put an end to their little smoking foray, and tell them that in Snowmass Village you can't do it. And if, you know, we got pushback or they were repeat offenders, that's when maybe we send them to see the judge, and the judge has them go into some form of education where they find out exactly what smoking, how destructive it is. But back to your initial question, Bob, you know, I look at it, again, I professed a willingness and a want to work with the organizations, the companies that are selling the products here on a positive level, find out what their training is, check with them frequently to make sure they're doing the right thing. 2 have already decided to do that. The state has a pretty prolific sting program, and they can continue to do that. That's a place I would prefer not to go. I'll never say never, but unless a store crops up that just can't get its act together, I would prefer to play a more positive role in relationship networking with that company than sneaking behind the scenes and trying to catch them at an act like that. I think that'll be destructive to the community, and it just wouldn't work well.
So you'd like to see possession?
I would.
Okay.
I think that that's a big step. There's a lot of states in the country that do possession. Most of them are 18, up to 18. A couple are up to 19. I don't know if any of the new ones are up to 21. We might be one of the first, but I think it sends a strong message. I can't.
Carbondale already has it.
No possession?
Yeah.
So they're there locally.
Okay.
Again, I just think it would help us. You would never want to target the kids smoking without going after the retailers and all that kind of stuff. That's probably an unfair thing, but we're wrapping this into one big package and trying to attack it from every avenue. And I think that would be the most effective.
Yeah, Dr. Levins?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think in terms of focusing on T21 and really passing a very strong ordinance in Snowmass and creating that as a precedence, and then potentially looking at this as a second in terms of doing it together, which I applaud your efforts, but it may be a lot to take off at first. And in terms of the tobacco retail license, I think, the best way to go, you can look at the basalt ordinance and use that in terms of what the fines are. Is a full tobacco retail license and using decoys and fines and enforcing it that way and putting it in the full effect and including cigarettes and all tobacco products, vaping, and making a really nice complete ordinance here in Snowmass. And I think the point here is incredible in terms of how many events are in Snowmass that you are, this is a leader in terms of youth coming here and what kind of values and that the town wants to represent in terms of people from all over youth from all over the nation come to these huge concerts here, and a lot of the events that are going on and increasing and will continue to increase in Snowmass. So in terms of that, I don't know if that's what your question was, Bob. What type of?
Well, my question was really about enforcement, which Brian answered, but a couple of things come to my mind. I did speak to one of the business owners who is still selling tobacco products, who tells me that under 5% of their sales are to 18 to 21-year-olds. Under 5% doesn't sound like a terribly big number to me. And it happens, and I didn't know that until tonight, that this particular business does not sell vaping products. So that kind of, in my mind, I am separating out, traditional tobacco products from vaping products. And as I listen to what you were saying, Doctor, the vaping products are the things that the younger children are getting hooked up on, and it's the major problem that is being heard about in the schools. So I guess I come back around to the vending machine thing. Again, it's some of this is the way our town is set up, right? We have a vending machine in a bar. You have to be 21 to be in that bar and drink.
No, you can be under 21.
But not to be in the bar.
Right. You have to be 21 in that bar to drink.
But you can still be present in that bar.
You can still be present.
Yes.
So,
And you could also go to the bathroom and the vending machine's at the back door.
Exactly.
That one's going to be removed.
but that's going to be removed. I'm really talking about Zane's.
Well, it needs to go.
Well, I disagree. I would like to know if the vending machine is next to the bar, and if that vending machine can be programmed not to take money, but to take tokens that are given out by the bartender after checking, identification, so that there is a process for confirming that someone's 21.
You know what I would do?
What would you do?
How would you sell tobacco products?
How would you,
Kids are very smart.
yeah, they
So,
are,
so you have 21-year-old person who gets the tokens.
yeah.
The cigarettes come out of the machine. I walk down the hall or out the door, guess what? I'm selling them to a 17-year-old.
Okay, and that will happen, that can happen in Sundance, that could happen in the Conoco, that can happen any place. But what I understand is that it's not 21-year-old plus that are getting cigarettes and tobacco products to younger, under 18 people. It's 18-year-olds buying them for their buddies who are 15 and 16 and 17.
I don't know the answer. Reese?
So
you've
I
got-
guess I can add I'll just respond to a couple of the things that have come up. My response to the vending machine issue, I guess it would be an option to potentially find another way that they can get, rather than cash, like rather than being able to put cash in. I imagine that that could be an option. My concern about the vending machines is more from the perspective of the laws that we have now that say that tobacco products have to be behind a counter and that they can't be presented at eye level to children, because it makes young people more interested in the product going forward, because they do have colorful labels and different things. And so vending machines are usually down lower, which would make them, again, at eye level for young people. And so that would probably be my main concern. And the other concern would be really making sure that those tokens are not just being passed around. I think that might be an easy thing to pass. In terms of licensing, I just want to tell you about a study that just came out from the American Academy of Pediatrics, like a couple weeks ago, I think, and it wasn't available, obviously, when I was here last time. So they looked at municipalities with different enforcement structures, and they graded them based on a California grading system that has been created. There's 4 grades, A through D, and then F, so I guess there's no E. So they grade them based on how strong the licensing is. And what they found is that those municipalities that had a grade of A, the kids had a 50% less likely chance of starting to use cigarettes or continuing to use cigarettes at the 2-year follow-up. And that went for e-cigarettes as well. The A grade included, I didn't write it down. Okay, so the A grade included having a license, having that license be renewed every year, having the cost of the license cover the cost of enforcement, and having some mechanism for checking compliance. And so those were the 4 things that were required to get that A grade. The F grade was simply any place that didn't have a license. And so that difference between simply not having the license and then having a strong, what Kim called like a comprehensive system, I think is shown pretty clearly in the 2-year data between the first year that they started and the 2-year follow-up. In terms of, Brian, what you spoke to about having that full package and making sure that we are coming out with everything, the research isn't great for the minor in possession kind of penalties. It really penalizes the young person. We know that tobacco companies are marketing so strongly to young people, and so we want to be careful that we're balancing kind of what the what is a young person's choice at this point because of this heavy marketing. And I think some of the other things that could be done instead of coming out with penalties for young people is to maybe look at the outdoor smoking regulations. So can you smoke at these events? Can you smoke out on the mall? Can you use your e-cigarettes or whatever other thing you're smoking in all the outdoor spaces and on the ski slopes and things like that? And that may be a way to kind of achieve that same objective. And the other thing that I would say in terms of looking at a full package is thinking about what resources we can put back into prevention and what is available for young people. We're going to be having a meeting March 4th, and I'd be more than happy to have somebody represent from Snowmass to talk about what's being done up and down the valley from Aspen to Parachute and what we can do differently. And so how can these municipalities that have gathered a lot of funding from the tax, what can we do that would be really impactful? The other thing that I just wanted to mention, because we're talking about cigarettes and e-cigarettes very differently, I think that that's very true. We're seeing huge numbers of e-cigarettes. We're seeing 2017, it was 21% of 8th graders had used a cigarette, and 71% of high school seniors had used an e-cigarette. I mean, those are huge numbers for 2017, and now we're a couple years down the road. But what we've also seen between 2015 and 2017 is an increase in cigarette use among our high school students. And so that's not particularly surprising, considering what Kim was talking about the addiction, but I think it does beg the question of, are cigarettes so different? And are they something to forget about because of that trend? I think those were, yeah?
Thank you. Yeah, and clearly, e-cigarettes are a way to become addicted to nicotine, and that there's a pathway to cigarette use after that. Bob, I was just thinking, and I just wanted to invite you to think about this for a second in terms of this. I'm really fascinated by that there is a vending machine in Snowmass for cigarettes in a bar.
Snowmass is an old town. It's,
Yeah. I mean, it's in a
1980.
bar where there's an addictive, alcohol is a addiction. Why a cigarette vending machine why do you want to try to continue to facilitate and accommodate that? Let's look at other addictions like caffeine. I'm addicted to caffeine. Why can't we have a coffee vending machine in there instead, or sugar or Coke? Why do we have to facilitate and accommodate by tokens the continued addiction to nicotine through cigarettes? Just to think about it, and why is that okay in this town when just because it's an old school place and they've got this and it's something that we don't see anymore anywhere else, why can't we take a stand? Why can't you take a stand on it and just say, actually, we don't support that? And why make it easier to get that addiction in a bar? It's just something to think about, like in terms of looking at this in a bigger perspective, which I try to do in terms of what all the addictions are and what do you want to facilitate your youth to get addicted to, and how, as a town, are you going to try to protect them? Because youth their decision making is different from adults, and their susceptibility to addiction is much higher than adults. And once they get addicted, it's a lifetime addiction. There's an 85 or 95% of adults who are addicted to nicotine through cigarettes or other modes started before the age of 21 or 18. So like 80%, 90% before the age of 18. So clearly it's like if you sell it to the youth, you have a customer for life. And that is the marketing scheme. And so it's just a stand to take. And so this, I don't know, I guess it just kind of angers me that it's back there and that there's some support still for keeping it there, just because you want to.
Don't misunderstand me. I am for raising the age to 21. Right? What I don't like is taking away a piece of a person's business when there might be other options that allow that business piece to remain.
Okay, so in terms of the 5%, nationwide, what it's been seen for Tobacco 21, and this has been looked at extensively, is that it's about 2% of sales. And so the argument for that, because you are clearly taking away a part of a retailer's income, and the argument is that you're a city and a town that has values, and that retailer has a social responsibility and an interest in protecting the youth. And so that they are willing to forego that it's about 2%, which is very minimal, to make a stand for protecting youth and a value in their community. And the retailers that I talked to when I did this, and when I was the first to do this in Aspen, I talked to all the retailers about that fact. I mean, that is a clear, on the table, you are the ones that are going to lose out on income from this. And why are we asking you to do this? Why is it important for you to do this? And what is the social responsibility behind it? And that's really the argument. It's just a conversation of like, are we as a community and as retailers interested in needing to support these values in our youth. And are we going to take a stand? And will they take a stand and support this? And, you know, it's not a punishment for them. It's just it's only 2%. It's very small. And most retailers that I talk to, because I just talked face to face with the owners, are like, yeah, that sounds great. That's a really important stand for us to take, and it's only 2%. The owner of the corner store in Aspen has 2 teenagers, and it was a slam dunk for him. It was a pretty good percent of his sales. So that's the angle, and that's the importance. And I understand what you're saying in terms of they are the ones that are losing out in this. But if you look at it as a win instead of a loss, and if they're joining a force in the community and coming together, it is a win for everybody.
Okay.
Did you say that the corner store in Aspen is no longer selling cigarettes or vaping products?
They 100% supported 18 to 21 when I first hit the ground with that. It was like a no-brainer. Like, yes, I'll lose that 2% just to support this. But he actually, on his own, took, and you know, they own 4 stores, and will you remind me what they did? They took vaping products, all vaping products off their shelf as a self-initiated statement. Amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I
and
don't
the loss of retail that they took from that to make that stand is unbelievable. And they did it in all 4 stores on their own.
I mean, I don't think you're going to find any resistance amongst us about raising the age to 21. I think we're very supportive of that. I think Bob's point is just he doesn't want to go to the retailer and say, I want to tell you how to run your business. And I think that's a fair argument. I get the social aspect of it. But I guess as a community, my point as a parent and as someone who deals with youth is, you know, my message is delay, 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 right? If we can get kids to delay until they're 21, you know, then they can make their decisions. Right. But I think, you know, once they get to be 21, I think at some point we're going to have to turn the reins loose. And I think, and not to speak for Bob, but I think that's where he's headed.
I think you just have to look at this in a historical perspective. We are telling retailers what they can and can't sell already. You can't sell alcohol to under 21-year-olds. So that movement happened in the 60s and 70s, that changed from 18 to 21. So we're already, you know, there's already these guidelines in place. It's just that when there's a change, you all of a sudden take a step back, and I totally get it. And that's part of the whole process in terms of we don't want to instruct and tell bars that you can't have a vending machine, but already we have so many guidelines and public health, you know, laws in place in terms of age restrictions and what they can and can't sell, that this is just because it's a change. It looks impressive, but it's kind of joining in. It's joining in with alcohol and marijuana. It's putting it across the boards that way. So,
Alyssa?
Well, I think Reese touched on this whole thing about being outside and about the regulations, and I don't think that it's tough enough, and I don't think that the signage is great. I mean, if you read the ordinance, it says they have to have proper signage, right? I mean, it is so disgusting when I'm standing in a lift line with my kids and people are smoking cigarettes. And it's happened so many times this year. I've seen people standing outside the El Camp restaurant. I've seen people all over the mall, right outside the doors of all the establishments. I mean, and in the mall, they have the cigarette things that you put the butts in. I mean, that's just gross. Like, I mean, there's no reason to have those things. It shouldn't be allowed at all. So the enforcement in the outside areas is not enough, in my opinion. And if it's a matter of, you know, better signage on Ski Co's part on the mountain, then that needs to be enforced, because I don't think the signage is great. And that is in the ordinance, unless I'm reading it wrong. And to go back to your thing about the establishments that aren't selling the vaping and how the people that own, you know, all those stores, at the meeting that I was at the other week, and Risa was there too, one of the kids said that they can still buy Juul at that one at the ABC.
She was talking about Roxy's, and that's not one of his stores.
Yes, it is.
Well, she was talking about like one of those 2 stores. So when we clarified with
yeah,
her,
and they own all of them.
I don't think they own Roxy's.
Yes, they do.
No, I'm actually in touch with the owner, as we've been speaking, I just texted him, and we've had this conversation on the phone recently, you and I, and they're trying to eliminate the flavors, okay? But, you know, they don't have the city tax there, they're county taxed.
Right.
So they're not, you know, in the same as the city limits. So tobacco is, they're very big sale item for them, okay?
What Mike told us was that, and he put a sign on one of the stores in Aspen, and there's a sign on the door in Basalt that they no longer sell any e-cigarette products at least those 2 stores. And then when he emailed you, he said that they took the e-cigarettes out of the 4.
All 4.
We'll have to double check. But
Well,
those 4.
you all work for Picken County.
No, Reese does not.
No.
Oh, sorry,
So-
sorry.
For Picken
Yeah,
But
County.
some of you work for Picken County. Why isn't Picken County having this discussion?
They are.
It's a great question.
Yeah. So, again, they're big, they sell a lot of tobacco products, and they make a lot of money on tobacco. Now, they don't have a problem with the age going up, okay? And they're concerned about the teenagers, and they know what's happening. One of their general managers is a graduate from Aspen High School, and so is his wife. And at any rate, and I've had this conversation before you and I talked recently with Cody, and they sell a lot of tobacco products. And at the moment, they're not taxed by the city. They're county taxed.
That's correct.
All right, and the kids know this.
Yes. And we
Right,
know
that's
that
the
the sales have
problem.
gone up at that store.
I know, and they know this.
We know that the sales went up at Roxy's when Aspen went to T21, just by anecdotal reports. And that's not unexpected. And that's why what Kim was talking about makes sense, the idea that we go together as kind of a block because the kids know where to go. And that's always going to be the case. And I think that was shown in Carbondale too, and then I'll let you answer that question.
Have any
because-
of you approached Roxy's?
Not yet, no.
I think
We
maybe
talked
need to
about
knock
it at
on
that
their door
meeting.
a little bit.
Yeah, we talked about it at that meeting, that it would be wonderful also for it to come from the community rather than me being the vaping girl kind of coming in. But so Carbondale did enforcement after they passed Tobacco 21. They went out and they educated all of the retailers. They did a lot of education, a lot of signage. They felt really good about it, and so they went and they did the minor compliance checks. And I think I told you this last time. They had 10 stores, and 4 of them failed the minor compliance check. 2 stores had previously just failed the state check for under 18. But then they went and they did it a month later, really like right on the day, and only 1 of the stores failed. And so I think it sent a message, but also it helped them to figure out where the issues were so that they could do more education, which they did in that 1 month period. And then they went back and they've seen a real reduction. So yes, we know that kids are going to Roxy's, and yeah, we would love for that to come from the community as well, that support for that piece, and we'll follow up about the other bit. But in terms of the county, I'll let Karen speak to that.
So, unlike municipalities, counties don't actually have the ability to do retail licensing around tobacco. And so we acknowledge that we could go ahead and do T21 in unincorporated Picken County. However, we want to have that teeth, which is really the retail licensing piece of this whole thing. So just last week, House Bill 1033 went up at the state level, and this is a House bill that allows counties to do retail licensing. So we had Board of Health members and some staff go down there and really advocate for that policy, that if it goes through the legislature, it will really make a big difference in counties being able to be a part of that continuum, because we recognize that, yes, Aspen, if all the municipalities go with T21 and the retail licensing, we still have an unincorporated Picken County to deal with. And so we're really pushing at the state level for counties to be able to have that ability to do that.
So there's 7-Eleven Basalt, is that Pitt County or Eagle County? And what do they sell?
They are regulated under Basalt, at the town of Basalt.
Okay, so, but what county, what county is the 7-Eleven? Because there's a
Eagle.
fine line right there.
Eagle.
Where some of them, Basalt's in Eagle County, some Basalt's in
Yeah.
Picken County.
Because they're not unincorporated, because they're not unincorporated Picken County, they fall under the town of Basalt's regulations either way. So I don't know.
Same with the store by the roundabout,
Yep, yep.
by the gas
Yep.
station.
Yeah, they all, and 7-Eleven failed the state check for under 18 compliance checks.
Okay, we need to give some direction here. It's getting close to 6 o'clock. Personally, I'd like to see, I know there is the issue of the 15,000. So, to me,
If you give us direction, we'll write it up.
license, enforcement,
Or,
everything.
do you,
I'm gonna just,
Okay.
I'm gonna give some direction, and we'll figure out if everybody's there.
Okay.
Is licensure, enforcement, your comment about possessions well taken, for our younger people, thank you, Dr. Levens. I would really, and, you know, one thing I didn't bring up, Andrew, thank you for taking the lead at Sundance. Thank you very, very much. And more education, emphasis for youth on education and whatever we can do. I'm fine with the fines and all that kind of stuff, and I did not spend as much time going through each one of the enforcements with Aspen and Basalt and Carbondale, but that's where I am. Bob, Bill, where are you? And Alyssa?
Do you have an idea of a fee for the license?
No.
We'll come up with that.
I was gonna have you guys to figure that part out. Alyssa?
Okay, wait, so Mark, you say that again, you're moving,
I'm after licensing,
oh, you're still after licensing.
all products. Tobacco and tobacco-related products has to be licensed. 2 is
The education.
education, particularly for the youth. But 3, enforcement. And Brian brought the issue up on possession, which my understanding is already part of our code, but we may want to take a look at that.
No, it's not, it's not part of Colorado's law
Okay.
either. I mean,
Oh,
they,
I'm fine with the possession, throw
it-
that piece in.
so this is something extra.
And I'll just mention that Carbondale put possession in, but they are very strong about the fact that they do not enforce it.
Well, then what good is it?
I'm not sure why it's there, but they are,
It's
the police
a
chief is
tool
very
just in
clear on the
case
fact that they
decide to go
don't.
that direction. Yeah. Okay, Alyssa?
I'm with you.
Okay. Bill?
I'm in favor of licensing for 21.
I like option 2 because it doesn't have to be put on a ballot initiative for vote for the people. And I like the idea of adding possession to option 2, which is raising it to 21. But the licensing part, I think, aren't we already licensed? Aren't these places already licensed to sell tobacco?
No.
So I'm confused of why, how
Would be
how
a-
could they sell
would be a-
tobacco?
They have a $10 state license to sell it, but this would be a license like our liquor license, a local authority license.
They actually
Municipality-
have, oh, I'm sorry.
A municipality-issued license, as we do in conjunction with the state for liquor licenses.
So, but anything with the license requires a ballot,
No.
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 It would,
No, that's-
instead of just fining the people that violated the law by selling to somebody underage, this would be a way to go after the business by yanking the license and preventing them from selling further. It would, it's one more tool for enforcement.
Well, I like option 2, if that means, because I don't think government works in slow ways. So, I mean, if we're going to put something on a ballot, it's gonna take forever to
You don't-
take.
We
don't
don't
have
need
to
to
put
put it
this
on
on
the
the
ballot.
Oh, the
Oh,
ballot,
for
only on the
option
ballot
number
if-
1,
the
for option
ballot-
number 1,
no,
right?
ballot
No.
is for additional sales tax on
That's what
tobacco.
Aspen did,
Okay.
and Basalt too, I think.
That's not an option we're putting forward, because it's
It's
a
fine.
ways out right now.
I'll just clarify, there is no state license for tobacco. There's a state license for Christmas trees, ice, eggs. There's no state license for tobacco. The $10 license that they currently have is to be a tobacco distributor. It means that they can distribute tobacco to other retailers that then sell it themselves. So they're, for anybody could sell cigarettes or e-cigarettes.
Favor
with no
licensing
I'm
them?
in favor of it. I'm in
Okay,
favor of it,
good.
yes.
Bob?
I'm in favor of raising the age to 21. I don't particularly see the license as frankly, any real additional deterrent.
Well, you've got 4 that want licensing, so let's move forward with the developing the ordinance. Okay, thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you, ladies.
Yeah, thank you so much for letting us
Yeah,
come and share.
really, just the opportunity to learn is really wonderful for those who work within the field. And I was asked by one of our community members yesterday, and there were some other women standing around me, and they wanted to know if we held a community event at someone's house for education purposes, or even at the Snowmass Chapel in the community room, if somebody could come and speak about this issue.
We've done lots of them. We'd be more
Okay,
than,
okay.
I'd
So
be
we
more than
could-
happy to.
We could figure it out. Okay,
Karen can
thank
come.
you. Thank you, and thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we're gonna need a few minute break, Gina and Danny. 5 minutes?
5 minutes is
chew up while I got my mouth.
I get 2 trays. Thing is like 24.
The next item on our agenda is a discussion with Krablunik. And Danny and Gina Phillips are here this evening. Good, welcome. Sorry we kept you so long. Hope you learned a lot about tobacco and everything you want to know about.
Thank you.
Because you have kids, so, okay. So given that, Clint, do you want to introduce the topic? You want me to, or you want to just go ahead and turn it over? Go for it. Okay. As we know, if we've read the papers, that over the last few weeks, Krablunik has suggested some changes in their operations, particularly associated with the restaurant. To that end, Danny, Gina, myself, John Dresser, and Clint met about a week and a half ago, I don't remember, and talked about some of them, and then we got another little twist that came out in the paper on Saturday or Sunday. So I'm going to let you guys go ahead and talk and what's going on. And
Sure, if you want to, do just one item at a time, or
well, that's probably a good
start
idea.
with the restaurant?
There's 3 items. So you want to, what are the 3 items that we are going to discuss? There's 3. One is the restaurant, 1 is kennel management plan, and 3 is the ability to purchase the land earlier, okay? So
Yes.
those are the 3, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
We start with the restaurant. You know, when this lease was originated with Dan back in 2006, there was a different business model that Dan had been using previous before us, and a lot of things have changed since then. There's a ton of restaurants in the villages now. There's new restaurants coming, and it's getting harder and harder to find staff for an off-the-bus system restaurant. And, you know, there's so many restaurants and so many people out there. And, you know, really it's harder and harder for people to ski in, ski out. And, you know, really the restaurant isn't lucrative at all. It's something that takes a lot of time, energy, and money, and falls short every season. We've done a lot in the last 5 seasons. It's definitely something that we didn't take lightly. We love the restaurant. We love the atmosphere and everything about it. But when it comes down to numbers as a private business, you have to start making decisions that really make sense. And staffing's difficult, and getting people out there is more and more difficult. And before we go further into the hole, that's what kind of brought us to this point right now, is kind of talking about what our future can be, and still being a public asset and doing more things. But you know, the village is very saturated with restaurants right now, and it's hard for us to maintain it.
Questions or?
I have questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Hold on. Okay, so my well, I have 2 questions with regard to the restaurant paragraph that was in the little thing you gave us. The first is that in the agreement, it is talking about being open for dinner, right? So it doesn't say anything about lunch. So then my question is, why is ski in, ski out an issue if it's really more about dinner than about lunch?
Well, that makes sense, right?
It's just the restaurant as a whole.
Okay, well, it's just one of the reasons you cited as, you know,
Right,
it
because
becoming
that's-
difficult.
Yeah, because that's specifically, in the lease, it specifically talks about dinner.
Right.
You know, I don't think it would make a difference if, you know, we had lunches or dinners, or, you know, it's the restaurant, it's looking at the restaurant as a whole, is not currently a viable part of the business, and is getting harder and harder to staff.
So you also speak to ski in, ski out.
Mm-hmm.
What is the path to get down there now? I used to ski in there all the time.
The Ski-Co building is there now, which wasn't there until 2006, I believe. and that was the path
Yeah, okay.
to get into into Krabloonik. With that building being there now, it's just more and more difficult for people to get in. It's actually not a ski-in, it's more of a walk-in with your ski boots on.
Yeah, it sure
And
is.
we have a lot of frustrated guests that
I've
make it
seen
in
those
there. and-
frustrated guests. I
Yeah,
had a
and
person
it's-
yelling at me.
And, that's something that we can't change. We can't change anything above us to make it easier for skiers to ski in.
Have you talked to SkiCo about accommodating the ski-in and figuring out with them how to do that?
Well, I believe that was the agreement in the beginning with Dan McKeeshan, that it would be ski in, ski out.
Yeah.
And it is possible, it's just really technical.
Well, it used to
You know,
be
and
pretty
it's-
simple.
Yeah, and then now it's not. Now it's kind of, the lower slot, then jag down our trail, then you gotta ski into the kennel and.
But have you
Right.
talked to
We'll get-
SkiCo about how you could get an access coming in there and going out?
No, we haven't talked
Okay.
to SkiCo about it.
Okay.
So are you currently doing lunches or no?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And Danny used to do, McKeechin always had lunch. We used to go down there at least once a week.
Mhm.
In that reference point, the divide wasn't there either.
Mhm.
Divide wasn't there?
You said the
wasn't-
divide wasn't there.
So the parking lot's gone that was above.
Yes.
That's gone, and, in the evening, it was always well lit to get down to the restaurant. So are you currently open for dinner?
We close down about 6 o'clock every night.
They used to be,
Right, I
about
know.
4 weeks
were-
ago?
No, and
Yes.
Yeah.
and having the variety of the wild game or whatever Dan had back then, and was interesting, and it was very popular. And I just don't know if I disagree with you in regards to the village is saturated with restaurants. The village is not saturated with really great restaurants. I mean, so I think Krabloonik always had a niche of its own at that point. And I understand how tough it is to get staff, especially when they're not making any money. You can't, and all these restaurant people doing the seasonality of Snowmass Village is a problem to begin with. As a wait staff person, you want to be able to provide for your family, not just 4 or 5 months a year. You've got to, that's great if they're young and they can take off for off-season and that works out. But, the people need to make money 12 months out of the year. If they chose to go away on vacation for 2 to 4 weeks, they don't have any money coming in, that's their choice, but that restaurant needs to be open. So I'm disappointed that the restaurant's not open. I think there's other options. I think there's some other options that could happen, because I think that the place it's such a unique building, a unique spot in Snowmass, that I'd hate to see it go away.
Well, and I think it's a different type of experience. I mean, it's an experience. Other restaurants, you walk in the door, you sit down, you eat. I mean, this is an experience. It's like if you went up to Lynn Britt for one of their evening things. I mean, it's definitely, people are paying for the experience, whether it's Uller Night or Krabloonik. And so, I do agree. I mean, look, I don't want to see you guys go in a hole either. I just am trying to figure out, like, maybe there's some things that haven't been explored. And in the part about the restaurant, you talk about, it could be a bigger asset. What is that bigger asset?
Well, there's a lot of things. The restaurant itself is very limited on the type of people that come in. We serve 15 or 20 people at night for a dinner. It's not family friendly. Our new menu is more of a year-round menu. It's more family friendly. It's something that we've been working on with the business model from Krabloonik from day one, is to be in line with what the town's trying to do as far as more family activities. We've talked with different artists that would like to come in and do some art projects with the kids. We still want to maintain our liquor license, and you know, the parents can come in and they can have some drinks and have a good time, and you know, the kids can go up and do an art project, and the driver from the hotels pick them up. More things like that. We offer kennel tours instead of having the restaurant where people come in and they have lunch with us before the ride, and they watch out the windows and they wonder about the dogs and how they live and things like that. We offer a kennel tour now in lieu of the lunch, and people love it. They, you know, part of what we talked about 4 years ago when we sat here was public education, and you know, I would much rather see somebody being educated about the dogs and the lifestyle than wondering about it through the windows. And there's a lot of opportunities for the building and the space that we could use, you know, just family focused, and rather than $100 steak, you know, people can come in and they can have pasta with the kids and things like that that make it more inviting for people to come in. It was not a very inviting place for families before. I think that's something we all have strived to do, is make it more open for everyone.
I mean, I think regardless of what actually happens with the restaurant part of it, the ski access needs to be looked at. Because like today, I was working, not on my normal day, but I was skiing down and I got stopped by these people on campground, and they said, hey, we want to ski to Krabloonik. And I said, are you going to eat? What are you doing there? They said, no, we just want to go there and we want to do a kennel tour. And so I had to explain to them how to get there, and I then relayed that I don't think it's very easy anymore, but they were up for the adventure. But I do think that even if you're going to be offering kennel tours or whatever it is, people may want to ski into that. So that access has to be discussed with SkiCo and how to better it, and just better signage in general, because I know that's been one of the complaints from people, that the signage isn't great.
Right.
So I think that's important for us to look at, regardless of what happens with anything else.
Well, even with the restaurant, was there any consideration of bringing in a consultant to look at the restaurant and how to make it profitable and look at the menu? Or was there any consideration of subleasing the restaurant to?
It says in the lease, I don't
anyone.
think that we can sublease it
Huh?
until, I don't think we can sublease anything for 10 years. Is that correct?
Well, you probably could. I mean, we're talking about the lease. That's
Right.
never, it came to
Right.
my mind after
Right.
we met about, well, if I were, the new announcement about our new restaurant, could that person have come in and said, I'll take over the restaurant, I'll run it as a sublease, as a restaurateur? I mean, those are some options that have come to my mind since we last talked.
I would agree that those are some options. You know, I think that what we would like to convey to you guys is that it's been 5 years or 5 seasons of like 110% energy of trying to figure this out. How do you make it profitable in any ways, or just break even? A big problem is staffing. Right now, we do one shift. You know, the employees are finished up around 6 or 6:30, but when you offer dinner service, that's an entire flip. It's a 100% whole group of different people that have to be hired and brought in to operate that, and there's not a lot of there's not a lot of people out there to choose from right now.
Well, and the
It's,
biggest struggle we've had is in the kitchen, which is really where everything starts. I mean, we can staff the front of house, we can do all of that, but finding the staff to be in the kitchen where the food starts has been the struggle the whole time, but really a struggle this year. And so when we don't have the people in the kitchen, I mean, there's no way to make the food. You know, I can do everything else, but you know, staffing the kitchen has become super difficult.
So, any marketing? I haven't seen any marketing for the restaurant in the last several years. I mean,
Yeah, we
when,
market.
I haven't seen any, but I mean, I know Dan used to market it pretty well, and you couldn't get in there. I mean, you know, he was full and booked all the time.
And I don't know, I'm disappointed that, you know, if the town would lose that uniqueness of that building and the restaurant and the, you know, the dogs were there and so on. I mean, it was, well, I just think the options need to be looked into a little bit more. That's just my opinion on the restaurant side, because it's just, you know, it's a unique place, and people from, I'm gonna say, that come strictly for Aspen do go beyond the roundabout. They are discovering Snowmass Village, and I think they need to understand that there's just like when you talk to people in summertime, oh, I found this great restaurant, it's down in Woody Creek. It's not so, you know, it's not as unique as Klobunic. And I think, you know, I think maybe it needs to be part of the marketing or something, but at any rate, I'm disappointed that the restaurant's not open at night. I really am.
Let me ask a question, and this will be a legal question. So this lease is for lot 40, 45, and 51, correct? What lot does the restaurant sit on? As well as the kennels on 45?
51's the parking.
Does the town, within the lease, could the town take back the land that the restaurant is located on? And the town figure out how to bring in an entrepreneur to look at that restaurant?
I think
I know, I'm just asking, I'm just throwing stuff
Is
out.
it possible? Yes. I
Okay.
mean, that would be a mutual decision between the landlord and the tenant.
Well, what I'm hearing from Tom and Alyssa, it's a very unique experience, and you all know how much I have always enjoyed coming down. It's hard.
Can I ask another question?
Yeah.
I have not been in the kitchen, Dan. Is it outdated? Is there improvements that need to be done that you're not willing to make it more efficient?
No, it's actually the opposite. We've invested a ton of money into upgrading the kitchen.
Right. Yeah.
You know, the aesthetics in the restaurant, for the new carpet. It was a lot of years of, I mean, over 40 years of nothing being upgraded.
Right.
And we've invested
Okay, so I
thousands
mean,
of
I haven't been
into
in the
that.
building in a couple of years.
Sure, a lot of
Okay.
people haven't, and that's, you
And
know,
it's
that seems to be
the program.
why
Now,
we're
when
here.
you're open for lunch now, your lunch clientele is just the dog sled people that are coming for a sleigh ride, or?
No, we're open for à la carte, and we get people in there. It's, you know, it's fairly steady.
Okay.
Hmm.
Like how many people?
Less than 20, probably. the
On a
à la
given
carte.
day?
On a à la carte.
Yeah, it would have to be, it needs to be advertised, but in order for them to maintain their liquor license, they have to provide food.
Well, I understand that.
Okay.
So in a perfect world, you guys would serve lunch and do dog sled rides and not do dinner?
Yes.
That's what you'd like to see?
Yes, and we would like to have the ability as a private business to, let's try this. We tried a summer menu this year because we wanted to try to get more locals and more people coming in. And we're trying all these different things to make this thing work. But to be held to it, it's hard as a business person to, you know, to just be stuck with this commitment of running a restaurant when the numbers are not there.
Well, it's within the lease, the thing about fine dining or whatever is, that's in the first page of the lease, that's what they're asking to have
No,
changed.
I've kind of briefed through that. I didn't read the whole lease, but I saw that part, yeah.
I just wish we could have somebody come in and look at the operations and,
I mean, let's also remember too, that we define Krabloonik as one of our iconic treasures of this town.
Right.
So are you talking just about the dogs? Or are you talking about the whole experience?
the whole experience.
And if it's the whole experience, and we've identified that, their private entity as, you know, as that for us, then maybe it is upon us to try to see, okay, is there something else we can do about the restaurant that could help them but keep it going?
And then with that said too, I want to know how much we have to say in that as well. I mean, this is kind of getting on the line of, and that's why we're here, is that we have to make decisions for the best things for the business. And if part of the business is not working and not making money, it doesn't lie on the town, it lies on us. And so we have to have a certain amount of autonomy to be able to make these decisions for the town. And then if the town starts to say, well, we're going to bring people in, I mean, this starts to get a little
I appreciate
convoluted.
that, Jean, but you're sitting on land that's highly valued as a piece of property in this community, that a very modest amount of rent is paid to the town. And we, as a town, have invested a lot of time and energy to make sure that Krabloonik is there. And we understand you don't want people in the business, but we're trying to figure out how best could we make something work that perhaps hasn't been considered. Whether it's how to work with SkiCo. Can we work with SkiCo as a town? How do we get ski in, ski out to make it far more accessible to clientele that want to get off the ski mountain and get to Krabloonik? The restaurant, which has been iconic. Dan, you're exactly right. You used not to be able to get reservations. You were out a month to get reservations to go to Krabloonik.
You had to make them like a year in advance to get in there, I mean.
And I appreciate it, but the question is, can we as a town help the organization? It's your private business, it's our land. How do we make that work together to succeed if we believe it's a treasure? And I understand the limited menu now until 6 o'clock, and that's all well and good, because that's what you're talking about, so. But those are just some of my questions of exploration.
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna move
To the
on
next-
to your,
The next
your
one.
the next line, is you wanted to purchase the property.
Yes.
You know, if the business isn't working, obviously the dog business is working well enough that you're thinking of purchasing the property.
Yes, it is. And there's other factors in wanting to purchase the property as well. And a lot of that has to do with us wanting to be more private. We take a lot of heat from the $10 a year lease that gets thrown at our faces constantly.
But that was on the table when you signed up for it.
Oh, exactly, yes. But that is a way to get out of that negative publicity. If the media has a question, like it happened a couple weeks ago, they go to the town for the answer, and if the answer doesn't come back, if it comes back, it's a negative story, which impacts business tremendously. We plan on being here for 30, 40 more years, and our kids operating this business, and it's obviously, I mean, one bad article can ruin business.
That's for sure.
And we need to take that middle person out and have direct contact with us. We've gone through a lot since that article came out.
I didn't read the whole article, but just from what I've read in our packet and knowing what's happened to the business through the last 10 years, I knew Dan very well, and I actually stayed away from the restaurant on purpose because Dan wanted to give me, we traded some business stuff. Anyway, long and short of it was, it appears to me that more time needs to be spent on the restaurant. I mean, because your dog business is doing so well. I just think that you're abandoning the restaurant. This is my opinion, that's all, just from what I'm reading from the packet. I haven't been up there, so I don't even know you folks.
Right.
So just.
We
this
have a
is
lot of
just-
people like that.
And I didn't even read the article in the paper on purpose because it was in our packet coming up. And at any rate, just appears to me that you need to spend more time to incorporate both things, because that was the uniqueness of this building. And that's why this is kind of an icon to Snowmass Village, at least I thought it was.
Sure, and to add to that, I purchased, Gina and I purchased Krabloonik, I was Dan's manager also.
Right.
And I sat in countless meetings with other managers and Dan McKeeshan, making a strategy to shut the restaurant down, because the restaurant had been failing for years and years and years and years. And regardless of how many people booked, I mean, if you think about $25 an hour for every employee going out there and do the numbers on it, that restaurant's been losing money for 20 years probably. And this is something that, before I was the owner, I sat in countless meetings about, this is what, with his business coaches and everybody else saying, Dan, you need to shut this down. This doesn't make any sense. We have another bad season like we did last year, and we're losing money in the restaurant. That could put us out of business.
So we've talked about resiliency in the council and a lot of things. And in your business, it's got to be difficult after a season like last year when the campground ski area wasn't even open, barely open until what, the end of February or something like that?
Yes, it was a
Right.
it was a tough year. To be
I understand
creative.
that. That part I understand, but I still believe, I've never owned a restaurant. I've worked in a lot of restaurants years ago and tenant bar, but I mean, I just think something could be done. I mean, getting someone in to help advise you, because obviously you're in the dog business and you're doing very well at it, and you're making money at it, and the restaurant's pulling you down. But in the same token, you signed up for the whole package when you made the agreement to take on the lease. And I'm not, I don't know which direction I'm going in, but I just not liking the idea that the restaurant's gonna go away and that uniqueness for Kapluna could be gone.
And that's what we hear a lot. We hear people, they love the restaurant. Please don't shut the restaurant. I don't ever see them in the restaurant. So this is the problem that we're having, is that, yes, everybody loves the restaurant. We love the restaurant, but they're not showing up.
But you're not open at night.
Not now, but we were. We have been for the last 4 seasons. And continually, this is our 5th season, and through Christmas, we were open for dinner. This just happened recently because I can't staff the kitchen right now, and so that was the decision that we had to make. But, you know, people talk about how much they love the restaurant, but I'm not seeing their faces in the restaurant.
I understand. I totally understand.
Tom, coming back to your, you brought up the subject of the ability to purchase the land. So if in fact Krabloonik is an iconic part of Snowmass Village, I would be hesitant to allow the purchase to come sooner when the restaurant business is so tenuous. And that part of the iconoclasm of Krabloonik is this combination of, dog sledding and dogs and, and a more unique type of a restaurant. And so I guess from my perspective, I would be more inclined to look at that purchase if the restaurant was on a better footing.
I'm not interested in looking at purchase until 2025, which is the language in the lease, because that's 4 years, one bad year last year, and then all the stuff that we went through with people showing up in this room for I don't know how long, and then trying to work to make sure Krabloonik was on solid footing. I'm not even willing personally to entertain any purchase option at this point in time. I understand the need you can't get staff, limited menu, close at 6, figure out how we advertise at lunch, figure out how we can figure out to ski in, ski out. I think that's how we all need to work together.
Well, I think you guys are doing a great job with the dog business. I think it's I mean, you've really turned the corner there. It came from a very dark place, and you guys are really doing a great job there, and I think the dogs are in a much better place.
Thank you.
But I'm kind of in the same space where it comes to the early purchase. I think Snowmass is such a land-starved place. I have a hard time letting loose of any town-owned land. But I sympathize with you. I think running a restaurant is a tough business anywhere you're at, and you know, being tucked up there, and you know, with restaurants you got to do some volume. I think that's a real trick, and staffing is, man, it's a challenge. I hear you. Yeah, I think we need to explore some more options to see, you know, what we can do to help you guys out to get the restaurant going, because I think it is such a unique experience. I just hate to see that go away.
I mean, maybe just like 3 days a week, or, you know, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, or just to start, instead of being open 7 nights a week, maybe there's some options for just a few days a week.
Oh, gotta get some staff in that kitchen.
Well, I totally understand that.
You know what? We
Staffing
can all go down.
or hiring, it's not just our valley, it's a global thing. I mean, I totally understand that.
Yeah.
You know, running my business is a challenge as well, and believe me, I feel for you. And these people that need to make money, they can't work 3 days a week. They've got to have another 3 or 4 days somewhere else where they make money or something. You know, it's because of what housing costs in the valley.
Well, you have things like the Lynn-Britt thing that happens, you know, 2 or 3 nights a week. And obviously, it's difficult for staffing purposes, but maybe if you guys were able to team up with someone that provides like more of a catering service, like the ski company does. I'm not saying the ski company, but I'm just saying in general. I mean, maybe you team up with Gwen's when they get kicked out of their lease. I'm just saying, like, they have a big following. Maybe the soup would follow all the way to Krabloonik.
Well, the mushroom soup, I've already told Gina, that cannot go away. It's the best bowl of mushroom soup there is. So.
I mean, I think the biggest takeaway, and I think the most important thing to remember, is we just want to see you guys be successful. I mean, I don't think, I feel like if we had explored all options and nothing was working, then I think we'd all be like, okay, like, we are at an impasse, like, there's nothing else we can do. But I feel like there's still options we could explore, and I think we have to try that before we.
And to that extent, your request on the kennel management, I mean, to me, makes total sense. So, you know, that is, for me, a no-brainer, that, sure, we ought to make that, we ought to make that modification, because you're doing the best thing you can for the dogs, and it's working out for your business.
My only question on the kennel management, and I asked Clint this, and he didn't know the answer, maybe, but if the Best Practices Committee had reviewed that information.
And I didn't know that answer.
Yes, in our last annual meeting that we had.
Yeah, because we haven't seen the report from them
Right.
yet.
That's what we talked about a lot. They're all on board with it. We had
Okay.
the vet certify everything. And
That was the most
recommended
important
it.
thing. I mean, we had this
Sure.
committee, I just wanted to understand what their position was.
And I did get a note from Rebecca, who's the secretary for the committee. She had a death in the family over the holidays, and she wrote me and said, I know this is due. I'm just scrambled. And I didn't feel like that was the time to impose some will upon her.
No, it's fine. I
just wanted you to know that's why it is late.
And that's fine.
And with the best practices, we always try to make it very clear that we only facilitate it. We don't organize it or do anything or turn in reports. We only facilitate it.
Right.
Okay, so we've got some homework to do. Clint, what's the best game plan on follow-up here with Danny and Gina?
Well, that's a hard one. I mean, so just if I'm trying to summarize the council's position, the kennel management plan, there's support for allowing that change. So that would be, I mean, relatively easy change to making the lease. I didn't hear a lot of support for allowing for the early purchase.
Not for me.
No.
So there's 3, so that change would not need to be addressed. But the restaurant change is a difficult one. I mean, I hear support for sure that the council wants to find a way to keep it going. And the language now in the lease, I don't have the lease up, but it says something along the lines of in a similar manner.
It's 100 days, 100 days.
So would you like us to find some kind of language that would be along those lines and work with Danny and Gina and find some language to bring
Right.
back to you to see how best that could work?
Yes. And is there, I hear what Tom is saying, some suggestions, very, very
Yeah, I mean,
helpful.
I-
Is there anyone
I wish
that
I
we,
could open the restaurant, come down and help you. And
Oh, we
open
need
a
to
little
find a
Italian
chef.
restaurant at night, for 3 days a week.
There you go.
Okay, I'll do the cooking, 'cause I'm a good Italian cook.
Now, you gotta understand, if he goes in there and cooks Italian, they're in breach of their lease,
Right.
because it's not
Right.
consistent with past practices.
Right.
So you need, that's a very good example to
Yes.
understand.
I did say I wish I could.
I understand, but
is-
I'm saying if you could,
Yeah,
there would still
Right.
be a
Yes, very
required
clear.
modification to the lease.
we need to take a look at that whole clause in terms of food
Yeah.
management
And
for right
see,
now.
It kind of died a quick death here, but there was some conversation about a sublease to a restaurant operator. And Gina correctly pointed out that assigning the lease or subleasing any part of it is prohibited without the specific written consent of the landlord. So that is a place where there could be room to explore. I don't know any other word, but to look at from both sides. So, and that's also tied into after 2025. The tenant can assign the lease to a qualified operator of the restaurant and the dog sled. And with upon the consent of the landlord, which consent shall not be unreasonably withheld, which is a very different standard after they would meet that milestone. But as with anything in this lease, it can be modified. So that was something that kind of came up and didn't go any further, and I just wanted to revisit it because it is something that, I don't know. I don't know if it can work out or not, but there could be some room for movement on both sides in that area.
Okay, okay.
And as one of the reasons for wanting the purchase, and we can look at that later down the road, but was exactly for a reason like that. If we make a simple mistake as business operators, and then all of a sudden we're in violation of the lease, and that's how the article came out a couple weeks ago. As a business person, that doesn't make any sense for us that we could lose our business because of a simple mistake as let's have Tom come in and cook for 2 months, and that scares us. We're building a business that to last for generations, and the lease is so different than just a private business, that we can make a private business, we can make decisions, and things work. But with this lease, it really holds us to, if there's something in there, the fine lines, and we miss it, we're gonna lose our business after 20 years? It's just, that's
No,
hard for us to operate
I mean, I
under
think-
those stipulations.
I think, Danny, that the fact we're all trying to talk about how maintaining the business and getting it, strong again is just an indication that I don't think there's an intent for either of you to lose a business on something that
That
was
technical.
inadvertent.
So technical.
And you do need to understand that the town didn't come to your predecessor. Your predecessor came to the town, which then put that ownership into the public realm, and they are subject to state law in terms of what's public. And it makes it tough. It
does
does.
make it tough.
It makes it very
makes it tough.
We're trying to invest in a lifetime of doing this, and 4 years into it, there's the front page that says, "We'll come take your land." That's pretty rough as a business person to really want to invest in the next 20
Has there
years
been
of
any
that.
follow-up since that very unfortunate article came out?
Yes,
There was an article on Saturday, wasn't there?
I didn't read it.
yes.
That's what happened. Everybody read the first one and then didn't read anything afterwards.
Yeah.
So,
because that was very hurtful for everybody.
It was.
So,
But I think the intent should be, hey, you're coming to us, we have this problem, let's try to figure it out. I think it should be looked at in that realm, not like, hey,
let's
we're
work
gonna lose our
together.
business over this.
Yeah.
If it's subbing out the restaurant or, whatever scenario you guys wanna come up with or present, we're happy to explore those things. We're not gonna hold your feet to the fire. I mean, we wanna make sure that, it's working for everybody involved.
Thank you.
and we need to work on that together, like ski access. It's just not plain gonna happen if Danny shows up and starts knocking on Susan Cross's door.
I have a quick question,
Yeah.
Danny. I'm not gonna beat the drum here too much, but, so if it was open at night and that parking lot's gone, what type of light, is there still a way to get down to the restaurant in the dark?
Yes, it's all lit. We
Yeah.
put lighting up, more
Yeah.
lighting up, and
Well, 'cause I haven't
it's
been
well
up
lit.
there, and
Oh, I go all the time.
Mhm.
Well, I was
It
going
is-
all the time for dinner.
It's just difficult to, a lot of signage, and we're a mom and pop business, and mom and pop businesses don't
So
always
people
go to
need
the
to
big
park
guy.
up at the Divide parking lot, or
No.
can they park down by the ski company building?
No.
No, they can
Go
park down
past the
below.
ski
Yeah.
company building, you're
Correct.
It's
It's
actually a
parking
lot
lot.
almost
shorter
at
of
the
a walk.
front door.
Yeah. You
The
just walk
hike
down the
down and
steps.
back is gone.
Okay.
Sounds like we all need to go up for dinner.
Yeah.
Town outing.
Well, you have to go before 6.
I think
What
you
do you
should
think
all
I
go,
do?
I think you should all go together and put it on the town.
That's a great.
Call it research.
Research and perhaps we'll have you to cook.
I'm happy.
Oh, that'd be a breach. His Italian.
I'm not
his-
selling it. Just cooking to give it away.
I'm just saying, your Italian's like a little rusty.
Okay, well, we look forward to a follow-up.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you
you
very
guys
much.
for your
Thank you
time.
so much.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Okay, next item on the agenda. My
there more?
computer's almost out of juice. This is Town Council reports and actions. I'm gonna start with Alyssa.
Oh, okay. Hold on, I gotta go back to my notes. Anyways, okay, I went to Northwest Cog meeting, and I would say the thing I would bring up is the 2020 census. I already talked to Clint about it, and he said that they had a meeting with Pitkin and Aspen or something.
The local staff locally is working through the committees and trying to figure out how best to organize it, and so
Yeah.
all the pushing you'd like on us is great reminders, but we're on it, and we know it's important for the town.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest, issues that we face in Snowmass are really the second homeowners, the issues with the PO boxes, cause.
Part-time residents.
Sorry, part-time residents.
Thank you.
And rental
PO
properties,
boxes.
and there's a lot, it's a complicated process for us
Yeah.
because of the rentals and whatnot.
Yeah,
Lot
it's
of
a
work to do.
complicated process, but regardless, the people from the census came and did a presentation. It was actually really interesting, and they just talked about all the stuff that goes in behind the scenes. And for people that need jobs, it's a great opportunity for people looking for work, especially like off-season work. So, Marky,
Put my husband to work.
great.
When is, Alyssa, when is the census taken?
So the census, it says, okay, so March 23rd, 2020 is when the self-response to the census starts. And that means that you can go online and do it.
Put your own information.
Yes, and then, and it's tricky because it is during the election year and there's all these issues with that. But that's when it starts. Yes. And they count it from where you spend 6 months and 1 day. That is what it should be. But anyways, you can go to 2020census.gov and it gives you all the information. And if you go /jobs, it'll tell you how to get a job with the census. So,
Just say, you sign up, I'll sign up.
yeah, I mean, it's great for people that need seasonal work. So anyways, that was the biggest thing I got from that.
Nordic Council meeting was canceled this month because things are going so swimmingly well.
There's so much snow that,
They don't know what to do.
But
Roll out
the
skiing.
tracks are great. If you guys haven't been out on them, it's really good. And the separation between the walkers and Labrador Lane and the Nordic skiing is working really
Finally
well.
working, huh?
It's working well. It helps when there's snow and people don't want to go walking through the snow to get from one trail to the other. But, yeah, get out there on the trails.
Great. I don't have anything.
Wait,
I did attend the Autonomous Vehicle Conference in Palo Alto, and
When are we gonna get one to try?
I have some ideas of stuff we could do.
Good.
Yeah. You have to wait, but you may want to go to a website called localmotor.com. The prototype plants are in Phoenix and in Knoxville to see what they have done and how quickly they will build an autonomous vehicle. It's all about engineering, I'll tell you. And the person who founded it was a tank driver in Afghanistan or Iraq, and he took the science of that technology and applied it to development of an autonomous vehicle. There is an experiment going on in Denver. What's more than an experiment, it's going into actual production, and that's the route down at the airport with one of the vendors. Then there is, we really need to look at the 8 to 12 passenger autonomous buses for first last mile. And there's some examples of Zooks, which is a very interesting presenter, and another presenter down in a retirement community in Florida called The Villages. And they've got this whole thing going on within a retirement community.
I know people who live there, and it'll be interesting. I'll ask them to give me a heads up.
I can send you some of the attachments, but it was, I tell you, I had no idea of what's out there in that space until I went to the conference. I thought there was maybe 2 or 3 R&D people. Wrong. We are so far behind from where California and Phoenix is, and even Pennsylvania is really making some great strides. So I'll send you some links.
I have just an announcement that well, maybe I have 2. No, I'm too old. Ruapa is having a retreat on March 15th in Carbondale, and that is going to be actually facilitated. So that will be good. And I guess the other piece of news is I have been appointed to the airport community character committee.
Yes, I was so pleased and proud to know about that last week.
There you go.
Congratulations.
Yep. Thank
That's
you.
exciting for you.
Thank you. Oh, Clint's on the main committee.
And I mean, we've got a lot of staff. Rosabello's on a committee. Virginia McNeil's on a committee. So we're trying to be as involved as possible. It's a major project, and it's a good opportunity for us to give input.
There's a lot of applications, so.
There we go. That's it.
Okay, Corps preparing for their strategic planning retreat, February 21st. And basically, they continue to establish themselves as an innovative leader in sustainable energy and stuff. So it's been very busy for everybody that way, because I've got people calling me, interviewing for which direction we're going. So it's a very interesting board, and I do like it. And having, I wish I could bring Andrew from the environmental. He's got so many great ideas and stuff. I wish I could pull him into it a little bit. But at any rate, we're preparing for our retreat, February 21st, which will be an all-day affair. And along with that line would be also some of the goals for the 25th anniversary for CORE. Things will come out soon about that.
Great. We have any other business tonight? Nothing? Okay. Y'all have a good week, and we do not have a work session next Monday night. So 2 weeks from tonight at 4.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you very much, Bill.
I'll second.
Oh, Alyssa beat ya. Okay, we're adjourned.